Another weekend of college football has passed, and another firing at a premier program has occurred as Sunbelt Billy Napier found the axe after, winning a game, but after a dreadful start with high expectations for this season. Everybody knows the Gators entered the season with those high expectations because of how they finished the last year, getting on a tear. DJ Lagway taking over as quarterback and looking as good as he did this past season. But he hasn't lived up to the billing this year. Absolutely not a Heisman finalist. Nowhere near it, in fact. And the Gators are just slipping and slipping and slipping. Now, if you grew up in my generation, you view the Florida Gators as one of the elite programs, but kind of a sleeping giant right now. But let's be honest and look back at the history of what the Gators actually are for a second. They've had 29 head coaches throughout their program history. They joined the SEC in 1933, but only 2 of those 29 head coaches brought them SEC championships. That being, of course, Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. They won their first one under Spurrier in 1991. Yes, that's right. It took them 58 years as being a member of the SEC Conference to finally win the daggone thing. Not even Spurrier as a player, a Heisman Trophy winner, could elevate that program and bring a championship to Gainesville. It took him as a head coach to do it. And yes, they dominated the 90s. Danny Werfel, among other electric players that played there. I mean, Heisman Trophy winner again in Danny Werfel. Urban brought him back after the Ron Zook years were not great. And from 25 to 2010, they were a dominant force to be reckoned with in the SEC again. So yeah, if you're in my generation, 40 and under, you think Florida is kind of a elite program. And when you really zoom out and look at the history of the program in its totality, they're really not a great program overall. They truly aren't. Only 2 head coaches have won SEC ships, and only those two coaches have brought them national titles as well. 2 under Meyer and the one in 96 under Spurrier with Danny Werfel. Well, Urban Meyer was a while ago, and he didn't win it even in his last 2 seasons as Nick Saban started to take over the SEC at Bama. So it's been a 17-year drought that's going to continue this year without a conference title, not even sniffing national title relevance in Gainesville at all. They've gone through a slew of head coaches. Of course, Will Muschamp, he became a meme for so many reasons. He was a lot like Brian Kelly. He screamed until his face was purple. Didn't work out at all. Jim McElwain, the shark humper, of course, he had a good start, but boy, did things really crumble there. And he hasn't really done much since his Florida days, coaching in Michigan, and now he's coaching the Central Michigan Chippewas. Then you look at Dan Mullen, all the success he had at Mississippi State. He transferred over to the Gators, and boy, did they take off right away under him. And I kind of thought they fired him prematurely, but kind of looking back on things, I mean, his last 2 years, his late season collapses, they really, really hurt the program and set him back. But I still kind of cling to that I think they fired Dan Mullen a little too prematurely. He was 34-15. He's the winningest coach since Urban Meyer, of course, Urban's disciple. But something about Billy, getting to the point of this video, man. I mean, 22-23, I thought he was going to be fired last year, but he went on a tear at the end of the year, switching quarterbacks and going to the freshman Lagway, and it saved him for a little bit longer. But they just didn't develop, not playing the way they're supposed to be, both defensively and offensively. The talent is there. He recruited well coming from the Louisiana Cajuns. He elevated Florida's recruiting, status in the state. But it didn't result in victories. It didn't result in any championships. And it didn't result in any relevance in the month of November. It was the obvious choice to fire Billy Napier. He had to go. He was tearing the program down despite pulling all these elite recruits year after year. The results just weren't matching the recruiting profile that Florida was having under Billy. And so they moved on midseason. As these coaches are just moving on, or these universities are moving on, midseason a lot more frequently now in this NIL era than any era that I've been a part of in my short 37 years on this earth. But you just got to come to grasp that there's too much money to be made to be losing games. There's too much money on the line to miss the playoffs. And these universities and ADs And these boosters, let's be honest, these boosters need to get ahead of the other universities and programs that are conducting coaching searches. We saw it, Penn State, James Franklin. UCLA was the first to fire their head coach after an 0-4 start. And honestly, look how that's turned around for them. They're going to keep Neuheisel Jr. But you have to get ahead of the game because there is so much on the line to make the right decision and bring the right man in. So let's get down to some replacements and who might fill the role down in Gainesville in the swamp and leading the Florida Gators. Will it be another dud, or will this be the third coach in Florida history to bring an SEC championship to the Florida faithful? There's a lot of names out there that are in contention for replacement, of course. If you want to stay inside the SEC, some guys that have elevated their program, I think really the first name you got to look at is Eli Drinkwitz from the Mizzou Tigers. 26-5 in the last 2.5 seasons at Mizzou. They are in the thick of things for a conference title and honestly the playoffs this season. I don't know if they're national title worthy. We're going to find out a little bit more about them as they play Vanderbilt this weekend. Should be a fun matchup there. But Eli Drinkwitz should absolutely be considered. Won the Cotton Bowl, 2 years ago versus Mile High State Buckeyes, and has really taken this program to heights they haven't seen since the late 2000s. If we're also staying inside the SEC, another name that just absolutely has to be mentioned, the other coach on the sideline in this weekend's matchup, Clark Lee. He's taken Vanderbilt to relevance again and winning, and they didn't even storm the field when they beat LSU this past weekend because they expected to win. Diego Pavia is kind of one of the stories of college football this season. And Clark Lee brought him in through the transfer portal and just elevated that program these last 2 seasons. Knocking off Bama, knocking off LSU at home. Some massive victories in the last 2 years. And Clark Lee absolutely has to be considered for this position. And then let's go back to that Vandy well again. Hey, James Franklin is looking for a job. I'm not sure he can win and get over the hump at a program like Florida, but with a fan base as passionate as the Florida Gators boast, there's potential that maybe a change of scenery, getting back in the SEC. He came from Vandy, was successful at Vandy. Maybe he wants to dip back into the SEC. I'd imagine he'd want to get out of the Big Ten because the comparisons would follow him. And honestly, the fan bases know him so well, I don't think they'd accept him as a head coach, despite him being a good head coach. He's not an elite head coach, but he is a good head coach. I personally think Franklin's going to take a year off. That's just what it seems like these coaches do. So I don't think he's a serious contender for this position. But if he doesn't want to take a year off, he should absolutely be in consideration. Now, moving to even more outsiders, I've got, 2 names here. Kenny Dillingham, what he's doing at Arizona State. They knocked off Texas Tech this past weekend and notching another top 10 victory for the Sun Devils. He's clearly a young up-and-comer, and he's going to lead a program to great success, if he doesn't want to stay at Arizona State. He certainly has the opportunity to stay in Tempe. It's a wonderful place. Phoenix is pretty awesome. Got some relatives there, and it's just a great place to visit and great place to live. But he's definitely in consideration. And then way outside the box right now, I don't really think this is a natural possibility, but I threw his name in there because he is familiar with the SEC, and that's former offensive coordinator for the LSU Tigers on the national title winning team, Joe Brady. He's the offensive coordinator for the Bills right now, who are obviously very successful. It would take a lot of money to lure him away from the NFL. He's been there for a few years now, since his days at LSU. Kind of flamed out in Carolina, but rebuilt his career, and he's doing really well with the Bills. And if he wants to be a head coach, that allure to be the leader of a program, I could see it pulling him away from the NFL. But we shall see who the Gators go to. Whoever it is, it's monumental, and they got to pull the Gators out of the doldrums. Like I said, it's been 17 years since the last SEC championship under Urban Meyer in 2008. That drought will continue this season as they're nowhere near sniffing an SEC championship. I have to say, though, I don't think the Florida Gators are going to make the right hire. I'll say that. They need to have a coach that can elevate the program. Because as we've seen throughout all their other 27 head coaches, yeah, they had good seasons and they were a decent program, but they were not an elite championship winning program. And I just don't think the Gators are that, perennially. They're just not. And so bring in the right man, and you can go back to those days. But it's been a long time, and those Gator fans are hungry. They are thirsty for more championships. They've tasted what it's like, and they want more. They want to see it again down in Gainesville. And honestly, the Florida Gator fans do deserve better than what they've served up, especially under Billy Napier. But that's going to do it for this one. Go Bucks and God bless. We'll see you on the next one.